Welcome, welcome, welcome. Another Fine Line Fridays. Happy Friday, Chad Westbrook. How are you today?
I'm good. We made it. It's Friday, right? Only a few hours left, depending on your if you're Pacific. Really sorry for you, but we made it.
Yeah, yes, sir. Myself, Will Riley, we do these podcasts every other Friday to give ourselves just 30 minutes to work on the business. We work in the business all week. So, Chad and I will share our thoughts on relevant topics within the industry. And today we're going to talk about how to correctly add a service unit. Now, we're going to say correctly, these are our thoughts, but we have been in the trenches and done a lot of what we're going to discuss here today. So, let's kick it off, right? So, to me, correctly adding a service unit goes kind of to two different styles, right? So you're already an existing contractor. I have service trucks now. How do I add another? But then the other style is I'm just starting off. I got nothing to go off of. And I'd love to cater to both sides. So let's start with the I don't have any vehicles out there that I can claim as a service vehicle. Where do you think they start?
Oh man. All right. So I'm gonna back up just a little bit because you're like we're gonna share our thoughts. When I come into these, I'm sharing all of my failures. I think that's the big
Mhm.
part of this, right? Because like if someone tells you how to do something, then like you don't and this is just for me, right? You don't always learn all the reasons why they're telling you to do it this specific way. And part of best practices is just that. They're best practices because someone has failed 300 times and the 301 time it worked, right? And then we're building on that. So I love what you said about that because in my head there's 0 to 1, which is just like you said, I don't have a service truck. I'd like to get one, right? Or maybe I'm using a subcontractor to do my service and I'd like to have my own truck. But then there's 1 to 2. And 1 to 2 is a completely different world because you are doubling the amount of revenue, which might sound great, but it means you're producing double the amount of revenue, which you means you need to sell double the amount of revenue. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff that we can unpack. And I'll let you start it. I mean, do we want to do 0 to 1? Do we want to do 1 to 2? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think from 0 to 1, and typically the way or where it comes from. Let's just use the case example. I'm an install contractor, and I typically send out someone from a crew to respond to warranty calls on my roofs, right? And hey, I kind of see there's a little bit of opportunity in that. So where do we start? Well, we could peel somebody off of a production crew and stick them in a truck, and as they get busy, start to deploy that or branch away and say this is now a dedicated resource. But as you define what that dedicated resource looks like, to me, you're right. You do have to start selling. You do have to have a demand to respond to leaks or perhaps warranties coming from the manufacturer to be able to keep that truck busy, because that's the biggest fear that I see is, well, I'm committing, to have a dedicated resources, but do I have enough work to keep it busy? So I have to go sell it. But if you sell at least what, $2,000 a week to start, and that turns to four, and that turns to 10, and we're starting to scale within that. But if you can get that first truck, this is my opinion, that first truck to have enough materials on it to service, let's say 80% of the things you'll encounter, I think you're off to a great start. And you've spent a lot of time in that world. One truck, let's say the case is a commercial replacement contractor responding to warranty calls. Now they're branching out onto a first dedicated service truck. Let's talk about that.
So, first off, I'm going to throw a plug out here because this is what I'm going to be talking about at ServiceCon. So, if you guys haven't checked out ServiceCon, check it out, ServiceCon, just how it sounds.com. But that's this is what I'm going to be talking about is that 0 to 1. And before you even can really commit to doing service, you got to commit up in your head, number one, because there's so many contractors, just like you said, right? Like, oh man, I peel my production guys off to go run those. And a lot of times you replaced one section on a building that has seven, right? And like we walk by all of these dollars to pick up dimes because we're just worried about our leak on our section because that's what I was sent out here to do. let alone we miss the coping that's flying off the side of the building or the rips inside the EPDM or, whatever crazy stuff is going on up there. We walk right past it to go to where the one issue is that they're having. And that's what service is about, right? Service is about helping the client prevent issues in their building. And if you don't believe that, it means that you're reactionary. Reactionary is responding to leaks, right? Which is, you have a leak, okay, cool, I'll go out there. That's not performing service. Performing good service is about helping the client actually reduce those leaks. And that's where the mindset starts, is that your technicians, right? Especially if you're bringing someone on board, they need to understand that. Because as long as they go up there and they're firefighting, then that's all it's ever going to be. And that's a huge, huge part. You talk about selling $2,000. I love that. Because in order to sell something, you got to quote it, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
order to quote something, you got to find it. Like, that's proactive. So that's a huge, huge part. That's the first thing that I'll say, right? Is that you have to understand that service starts with a mindset. And that mindset will give you far more success than anything else that you'll do when starting a service division.
No question. And I think that's going to resonate further with owners because that mindset needs to start at the top level. You can't just, not to say you couldn't, but hiring a service manager and expecting you to just get into service isn't always going to work. In most cases, it's not. So the why, we talk a lot about why even having a service offering, but we talk also a lot about the attraction around doing it properly, retention of a client. You said it before, service is about doing the right thing when no one's looking. So if you branch out and get a dedicated service truck and you start there, what does it look like? But that truck is taking care of customers, and that should be like the front of it all. But it's a different mindset if you peel off someone from a production crew because those are two different mentalities, right? Production crews are fast paced, banging out squares. You're not happy, you got to peel someone off and send them after a leak. But good service guys are more slower, they're more methodical, they're customer service oriented. So it's I know it's critical to put the right person in that first truck. Maybe we could talk a little about that too. Like, what's the right person to put in that truck? What are the right things to have on that truck? And really, in the beginning, you have to sell your work because you don't have people calling you for leaks. So in the beginning, it's very sales oriented.
So I love what you're saying. When I go in and I work with contractors, I always explain the first four parts to a business. And you said it, right? People, process, technology, and goals. And you've probably heard me say it inside other fine lines, right? So first off, people, right? You have to have the right person in that truck because that person has to have the right mindset. They have to understand what they're accomplishing. They're not going up there to be able to fix a deficiency inside a roof because that's not what your customer wants. Your customer wants the leak in the building to stop. It just so happens that you have to fix the deficiency, right? So they got to understand it's not just going up there and finding a bullet hole. We got to investigate from inside the building. So it's a huge, huge people side to it. Now the second part is the process. And that's also what you're talking about, like operations, right? Is different than service. Like the way I look at it is operations is a slow moving boat. You sell a job, you got 3 weeks to set it up. I get a roof leak. I got 30 minutes to get out there, right? I got 3 hours to get a tech on site, depending on what it is. Like that is fast moving. So you have to understand the process, which is it's not the technology you use, but it's how do you get somebody from point A to point B? Or how do you get that invoice from point A to Z, right? Which is cash in the bank. And that's a process side. The third side is technology, right? So technology should make things better, easier, and faster. Because if I was to have no technology, right? Go back 20 years, whatever it was, and I got a leak call from someone, I'd write it down on a piece of paper and then I'd put it inside that technician's box and he would come get that piece of paper and then go run it. Well, that's not logical anymore, right? Like, how was he taking his photos, right? There was no photos back there. So that's where technology plugs in and says, I'm going to dispatch it through the system. Then I'm going to assign it to the ETA to the technician, right? Which is then going to give your client an ETA automatically. So then technology, and the final one's goals, and that's down the road. But that's how you align the team to really the vision that you're trying to get. So I love that you said people, because that absolutely is the first part, is you got to have the right people, because the wrong people in the wrong seats can be devastating to the service experience that you guys give.
No question. I look at a lot of contractors that start their service departments, and I see two types if you boil it down. One is I'm going to invest in the people, invest in the vehicles ahead of time. And I'll be prepared to not earn any return on that for some period of time. The other I see is a sell your way through it. And I've seen both work, right? But it depends on your goals. It depends on your long-term vision for it. But you can sell your way through it. And that's typically where people start is I'm selling some service jobs. Well, what does that take? Well, I got to get on and off roofs. And perhaps I'm not giving them re-roof quotes. I'm going to give them repair quotes. That typically ties with these roof inspections, with life expectancy, with bringing the roof to the client, with here's your defects and here's where they're located on your roof. Here's the ones that are leaking. Here's the ones that are not. Start selling the work. Now we have something to produce and we have some revenue to go buy materials. Instead of buying just the materials we need, let's buy a few extra rolls, right? Let's get our membrane stocked up. Let's get our adhesive stocked up so we can, color match as needed, or fasteners stocked up. So at one point we end up with an inventory in one truck, and that's what we're after, is a template, right? Because we want to go to one truck to two trucks, we need a template. So people's a big part of that. The ability to sell and get the work is a part of that. And then it's building that truck. And I've seen some really awesome trucks out there.
Yeah.
And it depends on how you want to stock it, or how you want to outfit it, but you can sell your way through it too. I just want to comment a little bit about that because there's two different trains of thoughts. What do you think?
I agree with you. Agree, right? Because you're either going to use service as the primary driver of your business, where service comes first into everything you do. So one of the challenging things I'll share with you guys is that if someone calls you for a roof replacement, why do you think they called you for that roof replacement? The chances are they've had enough leaks that they're done dealing with it, and they've committed to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. Think about this. Truly think about this. This is insane that they would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars replacing their roof because they're so fed up with the leaks that they've had to deal with. Now you got the 1%ers that's like Walmart that replaces them on like a clockwork or whatever, right? But like 99.9% of replacements you're going to have is probably because they're done dealing with the situations that stem and start from service. So that, like, you talk about like going from 0 to 1, that's where it's at, guys. Every replacement that you guys have in private negotiated, obviously new construction doesn't count, right? But every replacement that you have, if you're not going in and performing service first, you're cutting yourself off, right, at selling more service. It's a huge part that when we talk about, okay, service comes first. Okay, you're looking at replacing the roof. All right, why? Oh, because you have so many leaks that you can't fix. Here's the second part that I'll share with you guys. Will, in your industry knowledge, if I had a roof replacement and I was an owner, and you came and met with me today, what do you think the duration of your sales process is to get me a proposal? And then what do you feel is the duration after I have the proposal that I actually give you the okay and say it's awarded?
Yeah, I mean, from delivery to the proposal, I mean, that could be a couple days. Sometimes it's weeks, depending on how large the job is and what's entailed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sign off on it could be months, could be years.
So I love that, because yes, you're right. And all of the time, whether it's a couple days, a couple weeks, or months, that's all time that your customer is dealing with the issues that have fed them up to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars replacing the roof. So who's servicing the building during that time?
Mhm.
It's a great value piece for you guys to be able to start service, to go from 0 to 1. Your customers are already buying service. The people you are quoting work to are already buying service. So you don't have to go out and do this big, huge marketing push and all this crazy stuff. Chances are the people you're already working with are buying service. They're just buying it from someone else, right? We call it grow versus scale in a lot of our sales side. And I'll be talking a lot about this at ServiceCon, but like, You want to start a service division? No problem. Look internal first. It's the first and easiest things to do, and you don't have to spend a boatload of money hoping that your strategy, your marketing strategy, or whatever it is right.
Absolutely. And it can grow, right? And it doesn't have to be this large investment. But service, when we talk about it being retention, that's a prime example of retaining that roof. Because before, if you didn't, you're quoting it and you're hoping you get it, the replacement. Um, but if you can give them a service proposal to help them solve their challenges now, your likelihood goes up drastically. Retain that client. That client may have other buildings. That client may have other opportunities, but that should be the mentality going in. And when you have one truck that is meeting your revenue goals, certainly paying for itself, starting to turn up the volume on margin, starting to define your company a little bit, go through a little bit of culture change too, and shift in identity. But then from that first truck to the second truck, and I've seen people that have enough service backlog where they're trying to hire for a service foreman or a superintendent, and they expect that superintendent or foreman they hired to just do what they're already doing. Let's talk about going from one to two and some of the challenges that exist from bringing outside help, or maybe it's better to grow your own.
So I assume you want my opinion.
I absolutely want your opinion.
Um, One to two, and I'm not trying to scare anybody with this, but it's the hardest thing that you're ever going to do in service. The first thing is that I think about people first. And we're going to a couple different topics on people. Number one is that if you have one truck that's working 40 or 45 hours a week, right? They're good, they're solid. Like, let's put a second truck inside place. If you don't have the backlog that you need, that 40 hours for those two guys in one truck changes to 20 hours when you have two guys in two trucks, or four guys, right, in two trucks. And think about that, because that's a lot of times that's not looked at. What's going to happen when your employees only have 20 hours a week? They're going to go find the money somewhere else, right? That's a scary, scary side. So we got to understand our people first. That if we're going to be able to add another truck, that it's going to affect our technicians and our foremans in their pocket if we don't correctly do it. And that's scary, right? We're all at the point where we want to protect our employees and we want to be able to correct our people. So that's always the first side. The second side, which I'll ask you about, Will, which is basically impossible, is like you got to find another foreman. Like that's the hardest part. I can buy a truck tomorrow. I can stock it and make it look cool, like done. I need someone in that truck that actually is good, right? That's going to actually be better than who I have. We don't ever want to hire someone worse than who we have, right? So you want someone better. Like that to me is the key to all of this.
It's the hardest part. It's the hardest part to fill, and it takes time. In the perfect world, every hire you bring on has a path forward. So when you have that first truck going, it might start off with just one, experienced roofer, but who you put with that experienced roofer matters because that could be that next truck. Ideally, you're hiring someone that has the desire to learn and take what the experienced roofer has already learned through several years of production or estimating or fixing problems. But that's the part that's hard to scale is the knowledge part. Coupling the knowledge part with the client facing side, because you don't want to hire someone that's got missing teeth or not doesn't have a driver's license and they're representing your company. So you're right, that's the biggest challenge. A lot of investments are made towards training, internal resources, continuing to mature our team, continuing to increase the level of which they know roofing. You can put an ad out and say, I'm looking for an experienced roofer. You got to arguably pay them more. You got to offer a great place to work. It's got to be enough for them to want to leave where they're at and come over. And that gets a little dicey, or it can. So you're right. I think, and I agree, the hardest challenge is going from one to two trucks, but there does seem to be a toppling point of which there's enough buzz in your market that, hey, that's a great place to go work for. And I've been there too. It's like, when we had 5 trucks out there, we had a really good thing going and everybody wanted to come on board. So have you gone Or let's say this, working with contractors that have successfully gone from 1 to 2, what do you think worked the best?
Understanding backlog.
Hmm.
That's the first thing, right? Whenever someone tells me they want to add a truck, right? It's like, man, I want to go from 1 to 3 trucks. I want to go from 2 to 5. It doesn't matter what it is. My first question is, okay, how are you going to know when you're ready? And the answer that I always get is feelings, right? It's like, well, we're going to be really busy. Well, guess what? We just had a hurricane go through and everyone's really busy right now. Does that mean they need to add a truck, a permanent truck that's always going to be there because of some natural event, right? There's a lot of variables that happen within that. So when you're talking about backlog, the first thing, and backlog to me is the health of the business. So I have scorecards that I use with my contractors, and what I'm looking for is consistent backlog, right? We can always sell the $140,000 or $50,000 big service contract, and it can look really, really good on a number. But if you took that one contract out, then it's not that good, right? That's not consistent. Consistent backlog is where you have work that you can schedule tomorrow if you wanted to, right? Or active backlog. That to me is the first indicator that we should be looking at adding another truck. Because again, I'm going right back to my people side. That's the first thing I care about is I don't want to take hours away from my employees. I actually want to
Mhm.
give my clients a better experience, and adding a second truck, yes, it's going to increase revenue. Yes, it's going to increase profitability. But what it's really going to do is it's going to allow me to be able to scale with my customers because I'm going to be able to get to them quicker and handle more of their work. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense too. So you need to have the proper, let's say, sales resources, consistent client base, getting on and off roofs consistently, and then tracking that too. Because in order to know the backlog, you have to have some form of way to view that. But it's interesting you talk about that because there is a direct correlation between what you sell and what you produce in service in ratio to what comes in. I call it produced, right? The difference between sell or produce. Produced work is inbound leak work, inbound warranty work. We're not going to go look at it. We're going to send a crew out. So I think it's important when looking at that backlog to also look at the percentage, the variation from produced work to sold work, and maintaining that too, because the bigger your client base becomes, the more consistent, they're calling in for issues as it rises.
Yep. I know we've talked a lot about sales on this. It's about adding a truck, right? But like sales is a big part of that. There's no better time than right now. So we're just entering Q4, right? There's no better time than right now for you to reach out to your customers and say, "Hey, do you guys have any big plans coming up this upcoming year?" And whether you ask for a budget or whatever it is, the whole reason that you're doing it, guys, is because you want to make sure that your company is properly staffed to respond to the needs or projects that they have, right? It's a real integrity thing that if I'm going to be your partner, I want to be able to respond. The last thing I want to do is be able to drop the ball, right? So when we start talking about that active backlog and understanding what our customers are worth, right? It's a great time right now for us to be able to make those calls to our clients and just say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm properly staffed. I want to make sure that I have enough trucks. I've been in a situation where I've had a client who acquired another company and I didn't have the resources to service it. It
Mm.
sucked, right? Like I lost revenue, right, of what I potentially could have had simply because I wasn't prepared. So there's a lot of different ways that it can help you understand when is the right time to add a truck. But to me, it's all about better understanding your averages and all better understanding the future, right? We know January and February are typically slow, right? It's colder. There's the different things that happen versus your March, April, May, which is your rainy months. You know you're going to be busy, right? So when you add that truck can also be a big variable of how successful it is.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective. And would you say that, let's say we are successfully going from 1 to 2, does it get easier after that? Does it get easier going 3 to 4?
Yes.
And is it the same kind of mindset of I'm balancing my backlog to when I invest in more service vehicles?
From my side, that backlog is always your indicator of are my clients upset with me? right? Because the
Mm.
bigger the backlog is, that means that you have more clients waiting. They have a problem or they have a goal they want to achieve, and they're waiting for you to accomplish that, right? The quicker you can get out there, obviously, is the better experience they're going to have. No one wants to wait a month for a contract. So that's always going to be my tolerance or the metric I'm looking at. But you asked, it doesn't get easier from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. Yes, absolutely, dude. Because when you go from 3 to 4, it's a 25% change, right? When you go from 2 to 3, it's a 33% change. And when I say change,
Mm.
I'm talking about the employee's hours. I'm talking about the amount of work that you're going to be produced. It's a lot easier to take 100,000, right, and divide that up than it is to take 20,000 and divide that up. So when I'm
Yeah, makes
looking at that numbers, I'm caring about my employees first, because that's the last thing I want is to add another truck and hurt my team.
right. Yeah, that's the last thing that we want to do because then we disrupt what we work so hard to build. What about pairing to the resources that you have on service with the resources you have to consistently sell the work and then manage the accounts too? So it's like a harmony when it all works together well. We talk about busy season, when it rains, are we going to have enough resources to respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
When it's slow, what do? We got to get on more roofs. Selling preventative maintenance agreements is a great time to do when it slows down, right? So there's things that we can do to have consistency throughout the year to make sure that all of the units that I do have are staying busy and optimized.
Yeah, agree.
Love it.
Agree 100% with that. So from my side, I mean, we can do all kinds of different things. We can sell big projects, but what I've always built was companies that are based upon stable, reoccurring revenue is beautiful, right? But stable environment, stable plans. I'm not just adding a truck because I'm upside down in work right now. I might go to production and see if they can help me, right? And then if I know, okay, this work is getting consistent, now my backlog is consistently there because sales is bringing more in, or you talked about produced work, right? Just the amount of lead calls that you're getting, right? It's becoming more common that you're not keeping up. Your backlog will be your first indicator, in my opinion, that's going to show you, yeah, we need another truck.
No question. And having some consistency is absolutely key. And when you really learn that when you go from 1 to 2, and especially from 2 to 3, that all right, I do have processes, and I enforce these processes. I can hire. You reach a point where you can hire another crew, and like it just works itself out because most of the team already knows all the processes. Yeah, this is how we do it. For example, we don't just go out and solve a leak. No, we show up, we shake the building owner's hand or check in. We take good care of the customer. We identify the issue. We take really good before and after photos, but also we look around. We capture more of that. We have a system or a process to support for those on-site proposals or after their on-site proposals. We close loop, we get paid, and we're rolling. That's the tipping point to be able to say that it gets easier when you add more units.
Right? Right? You can do it.
Good.
It's a
Well,
beautiful thing. It's all about being in control and understanding the numbers, right? The one thing I always work on is not about feelings, right? What's the metric that's going to say we need to do something? Because that's when we can make smart analytical decisions, right, on the business, is when those numbers are telling us where it is, not necessarily our feelings.
couldn't agree more. Chad, I think we hit it. How to correctly add a service unit. We gave our thoughts, we gave our opinions. There's really the two ways: is sell your way through it carefully, or plan it out and invest in it, and just know that it's not going to make money today. It's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah,
So
agree.
I appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next Fine Line.
Sounds good. Thank you.
See y'all.
See you.